the question.
Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. My guest today is Assemblyman Phil Steck. And Phil Steck is going to give his views on Mamdani. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, because
Mamdani.
yes, he's the presumptive candidate for mayor in the city of New York. And you work with him, and I don't know how extensive your interactions with him is, but I'd like to give the audience a kind of like a general idea of what he was like in the assembly, how he was to work with, and kind of to reinforce or dispel some of the stuff you're hearing on TV and on the radio about him. So, Phil, take over.
So I think Zohran Mamdani in the New York State Assembly, he's certainly a very intelligent man. He certainly has a very pleasant personality. Some might even say slick. He is apparently quite good on social media, for example, but in the assembly, he was not very active. And I think part of this stems from the great difference between New York City politics and upstate politics. In upstate politics, being a member of the assembly or the Senate is very important. In New York City, a lot of people feel it's more important to be a member of the city council.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see Mamdani engaging too much when he was in the assembly. And also, I think sometimes it was more about posturing for people in New York City than it was about trying to get meaningful things done in the assembly, which is frustrating for someone like myself because I feel I try very hard to accomplish things in the assembly. And I think the best example I can give is from 1905 to 1981, New York State had a very small sales tax on the sale of stocks. And I was engaged in trying to promote restoring that very small tax. And you would think that someone who calls himself a democratic socialist would be engaged in helping on that issue, but quite the contrary, because like the other members of the Democratic Socialists of America, he was more interested in posturing on the tax package of DSA than he was in working to reinstate the stock transfer tax. They had a financial transactions tax as part of their package, but it was much more extreme than ours. It had no chance of passing. But again, it was more important to engage in posturing on the issue than to join with the other 58 members who were co-sponsoring the bill to be a force to try and get it passed. So I think that was frustrating.
So, he's been in the assembly since 2020, correct?
I would have thought it was longer, but
Okay. So in 2020, he defeated an incumbent.
Who was it?
Simoto Arvella.
I don't know.
Okay. So in and then in 2022, he ran unopposed. In 2024, he ran unopposed. So if he was such a threat, the district didn't field anybody to run against him. I find it pretty interesting.
He certainly wasn't a threat in the New York State Assembly because he wasn't very active, is what I said. But on this issue of we have a real problem in the state and in the United States with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has been taken over by corporate and Wall Street interests.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't agree with that. That's why I was a Bernie Sanders delegate in both 2016 and 2020. I think that in the mayoral election, I think the Democratic voters at the base are tired and not very enthusiastic about that type of approach. And I think Zohran Mamdani, uh, you know, does represent people who don't feel that the corporate approach of the current Democratic leadership is really very helpful to the people. I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it is that New York City has a huge immigrant population that he's uniquely positioned to communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think those are the two factors that enabled him to be successful and become the candidate of the Democratic Party in the mayoral election.
Mm-hmm. So there's talk about Cuomo running as a third party on the third party line. There's talk of Adams running on the third party line, and there's talk of Curtis, who's running on the Republican line, to be kicked off the ballot and have Adams put in his place. So everything is so fluid and up in the air at this point.
Well, I think I don't know how Cuomo running as an independent. I believe Cuomo is independent and Adams already have qualified for the ballot. I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about what Slee was doing, but I don't know that Cuomo running actually hurts Donnie very much. It might hurt Adams more. It's hard to say because I think Mamdani is going to get the base of the Democratic Party, and Cuomo running would take more conservative elements that might go over to the to Adams, keep them from doing that. So I'm not sure Cuomo running hurts Mamdani. It's
Okay.
difficult to analyze. I think one of the problems that we always run into in the Democratic Party is that the right wing of the Democratic Party always expects unquestioned loyalty from the left wing of the Democratic Party. But if the left is successful, they don't give that loyalty back. So I think that is certainly a possible problem for Mamdani, but in comparison to Buffalo, where a similar event occurred, it is fair to say that Adams has been discredited to a large extent in a way that Byron Brown had not been. So
Right.
I don't know that it would be possible for Adams to be successful running as an independent.
Okay. So if the general election was held this week, what would your prediction be?
That's funny. I don't get asked that sort of thing. I would say that at the moment, I would predict Mamdani to be successful. I think that my belief is based on the fact that I think the current mayor, who we just talked about,
Adams.
Adams, I think he's been discredited quite a bit. The one thing is, of course, Mamdani did not do well among black voters. Cuomo did very well among black voters. I could see those same voters voting for Cuomo. I don't know that they would vote for Adams. I think a number of them would certainly vote for Mamdani, and I think he would get enough to be elected mayor. That's how I would see it.
Okay, so if he is elected mayor and all of these people are freaking out, the establishment is freaking out, are they going to calm down if he is elected?
My experience with because I'm the introducer of the bill to reinstate the stock transfer tax, which would hardly cause any difficulty to anyone because it's so small. You're dealing with 0.1%.
Wow.
That's all. But because there's so much trading volume in New York, it would raise a lot of money. Billions, maybe tens of billions. So they freak out about that. They say they're going to move, that Wall Street will move and all this kind of stuff. I don't know that they'll ever stop. I think that the part of that whole apparatus is convincing themselves that people like to think they're acting morally when they are acting for purely selfish economic motives. And I think that group wants to convince itself that they hold the key to economic development. I think quite to the contrary. I think they retard economic development by using up too many of societal's resources for themselves. I think New York City is a prime example because I had an economics professor in school who taught a very simple concept, and I like to use it because then everybody can understand it. In that, in the economy, we all vote with our dollars as to the goods and services that we want produced. But it's not like the political system. In the economic system, Jeff Bezos has billions and billions and billions of dollars compared to some that have very little. So there's an overproduction of luxury goods. And you can see that in housing in New York City, for example. So I think the city has become unaffordable. I mean, my own daughter lived there. It was, as a student, it was untenable. And she moved to Poughkeepsie. So I think Mamdani is 100% correct in his views of the economic issues facing the vast majority of people who live in New York City, and his supporters would say it's just too expensive. I think he's right, and I think the people who are arrayed against him are wrong, that they are, what's good for business is not necessarily good for the economy. The two are different. The economy depends on people of average means having enough money to spend in the economy to make it successful for everyone. And the problem is when those at the top are, using up far too much of the resources, you end up with economic difficulties. And I think that's where we are right now. I think there's a lot of people who thought for some reason, that Donald Trump was going to be the person to lead us out of that problem. But that's sort of like making a bad bet and then doubling down on it. So I think on the economic issues, he has a good message, which unfortunately the elite, not only of New York City, but of the Democratic Party just doesn't want to hear.
So I have a friend who lives in Queens, and I kept asking him, who do you think's going to win? And he kept telling me Cuomo, because the other candidates were so weak. I don't think Mamdani is pretty weak because he won.
Well, what he demonstrated, if you look at the statistics, he got younger people to vote. Because one of the problems we have is that in New York City, as a young person, unless you've gotten some fabulous job, people who work in ordinary occupations there don't feel they have much of a future. I think that's a big point. Second of all, Cuomo couldn't reach out to the, the South and the South Asian community like Mamdani could. I think that was a factor. And another factor, I think, also was that the assumption was that Mamdani's position on Israel-Palestine would hurt him. I think it helped him because even among Jewish voters, there's a very large percentage who, number one, do not think Israel should be in the West Bank at all. And so while a lot of those voters found what Hamas did absolutely abhorrent, they also do not feel that Israel has conducted the war in Gaza appropriately either. Mm-hmm. So I think that I think Mamdani, I think what made him a strong candidate was his focus on the economic needs of the people, which Cuomo, people knew, did not stand for that. No doubt. Cuomo is totally corporate. Many instances where he gave into corporate interests due to campaign contributions and things of that nature. And I think that Mamdani articulated things that were important to more recent immigrant communities in New York City. Brad Lander was also an excellent candidate, but he didn't inspire the young people, and he had no connection to those newer immigrant communities. So I think in some instances, one might say that Mr. Lander would have been a stronger candidate in a general election because I don't think he would have been at risk of losing more moderate support in the Democratic Party, but he was not as strong a candidate in the primary as the results show.
When Mamdani declared his candidacy, he declared it like during this past session. Were you surprised he decided to jump in the race for mayor?
Yes, I don't know that much about the politics of New York City. I only know what I see of the from people who represent New York City districts in the Assembly and to a lesser degree in the Senate. And I haven't seen any Assembly members who tried to run for state or citywide office in New York City have a tremendous amount of success. But again, I think what distinguishes Mamdani is because of his socialist background, he was able to articulate positions on economic issues, which made a sense to a lot of people. And also, again, he was uniquely positioned with respect to some of the recent immigrant communities that other members of the Assembly who had run were not positioned in that way. So, but I did find it surprising because of the fact that most of the Assembly members who ran for citywide office have not had a lot of success. But he again had, was positioned differently than they were.
And I think he used social media better than Cuomo did.
Well, I think it's funny because this is a tough subject. Again, I don't run in New York City.
Right.
In my district, we have not found social media to be very effective. we also don't generate the type of enthusiasm among young voters that Mamdani did. And a lot of the social media that the Democratic Assembly Campaign Committee does is sort of rote. It doesn't have the vibrancy that would appeal to the young voters that Mamdani was appealing to. So they use big national social media companies and things of that nature. I haven't found it I found its influence in my elections to be largely mythical. I have never gone to a door and met a voter who said, "Oh, I saw your advertisement on social media." I have gone to many doors where people said, "Oh, I heard your radio advertisement. I really liked it."
Wow,
Radio,
that's interesting.
yeah, well, radio is seen as old-fashioned, but I represent a mostly middle-class district, where people are mostly homeowners, whereas Mamdani is appealing more to young renters in the city of New York. They're just completely different. So I can't venture an opinion about social media because it hasn't been influential either for the Republicans or for the Democrats in my elections.
Okay, so you represent the area of Colony, right? What other
Colony,
areas?
Niskayuna, a
Yes.
quarter of Guilderland, and 15% of the city of Schenectady, though I used to represent before redistricting maybe 60% of Schenectady. So I have experience with the city, but I think the city of New York is very different.
Okay. So in the final analysis, what do you predict?
Well, personally, I was a Bernie delegate, not once, but twice. I think the Democratic Party has been going down the wrong road with this corporate orientation. I don't think that's what the party is about. I think the party is about the policies of Franklin Roosevelt, and they should have been continued, not abandoned. And so I'm hoping that Mamdani will be successful. And I don't, as a Jewish person, I believe in the existence of a state of Israel. I'm not sure that Mr. Mamdani shares that viewpoint, but this is an election for mayor of New York City, not president of the United States or secretary of state. So I don't see the fact that he has a certain pro-Palestinian perspectives. One, not all of them are wrong. I mean, Israel has no business in the West Bank. And I am hopeful that he's successful. I think it will send a very powerful message to the elites of the Democratic Party that the Democratic Party approach that it adopted in 1980 when Bill Clinton said we have to be more like Ronald Reagan to win elections is not a good approach and leads to the election of Donald Trump. That's
Right.
how I see it. And I think that Mamdani being successful would be a message that the party, if it wants to defeat Trumpian candidates on the Republican side, needs to change.
That's interesting. So, Phil, thank you. You've been listening to Assemblyman Phil Steck. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focused on the Candidates. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Phil, thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day.
All right, you too.